Welcome everybody. In this video, we're going to take a look at how to build a Python package, store it and build it and publish it to the Azure Pipelines artifact directory. We're going to store it in the repository and we're going to use the whole Azure Pipelines to build it and stuff like that. And then we're going to take a look at how to consume that package from our custom Azure Pipelines feed. Python is one of those programming languages where it is very, very easy to script something. So as you've been programming for quite a while, you know there are all these additional tasks that come along with programming. You may need to make an HTTP request here and there, move some data from A to B, you know, really ad hoc stuff. And having your own tool set, building up your own scripts in Python is very powerful. Usually I would use something like C# linkpad scripts as well, but Python comes very nice for that as well. And if you're working in a company, being able to distribute those tools and libraries is quite useful as well. So that's primarily why we're taking a look at this video. As always, if you enjoy these videos, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe. If you have any questions, make sure to leave them in the comment section. So we're gonna follow documentation, and then I'm gonna just pitch in everything that I found out, so just kind of observations and little edge cases, I guess you can call them that. But yeah, let's go ahead and start. I will leave all the links in the description. You're gonna need to have Python installed, right? Hopefully, if you're watching a Python video, you already have Python. You will need Azure DevOps account. So hopefully you've already signed up and you got it. So make sure you have repos, artifacts, and pipelines enabled. If you don't, go to project settings and get that enabled here. Again, this will be in the description, so you can go ahead and check that out. But essentially what we're going to do is we're going to set up an SRC folder with our package name, and we're just going to provide some example file where we're going to have things that we can use, i.e. functions and classes, right? So we're going to build up a library. Let's go ahead and create our directory. This is SRC, and by the way, I'm using PyCharm. You can use VS Code, you can use Sublime, you can use Notepad++, you can use whatever, really. Let's create our package. We'll call it example, right? So we have the init file, which basically says this is a Python package, so Python knows how to walk it. We'll then create our, let's just call it file. Doesn't need to be anything too fancy. We'll define a function, print hello. Well, yeah, we'll just do what it says, right? Print hello. We can then, let's say, create a class, my class. Let's get an init function in here. So this is a constructor, if you're not familiar with Python. Let's create a word here, and again, we'll just do print here, nothing too crazy, and we'll just print self. Word. There we go, right? So we have a function, we have a class, generally what it should contain. If you're building a CLI tool, I think you will have to have a main file here, which will be the thing that executes first. But anyway, here's our package. This is pretty much all you need. This is your library. This logic is ready to be reused in your other script, etc. Let's collapse that. Let's move on to the next sections of the documentation. We will need a couple of files to basically say this is a Python project, and some tools will now be able to recognize it and such, traverse specific folders to do specific things. If you work with C#, you're going to have a CSproj file, which contains the description about the package, and it will contain the requirements or dependencies, essentially, as requirements in Python, dependencies in other programming languages like JavaScript, C#, Java, you know, just a separate library that you depend on. All that is contained within the CSproj file, and then the .NET tool is able to recognize that. In JavaScript, you will have the package.json file, and then NPM or Yarn will be able to recognize it, or maybe Yarn has its own file. I can't remember. I don't use Yarn. In Java, you would have Maven and Gradle, and they would basically contain their definitions of your build process, the package information, so who built the package, and what dependencies you have, right? So we just need to provide that base layer for Python, and that's what the next couple of sections are. The project.toml file, so pyproject.toml, you can copy the name, come to the root here, create a file, pyproject.toml, copy all of this stuff, paste it in here, right? So super simple. This stuff right here, just if you want to know what these are, just read through here. Pretty self-explanatory. to be fair. And then configuration metadata. We need to set up a setup.cfg file. And let's go. CFG. Let's copy all of this, and I mean the information in this again should be pretty self-explanatory. We are just describing the package. So what's the name of the package, who built it, the version, and then we have kind of like build options of where does our package contain and what version we're gonna need at least, right? So there's a couple of options here. There's a point here that you can make it dynamic, and you will see that there's this setup.py. We will use both because setup.py, it's not actually shown here, but you can have dependencies. If you have a require.txt file where you have your requirements, you generally specify them in here. So let's do that. And again, this is basically dynamic setup. This is static setup. I mean, as it shows there. Let's go ahead and create our Python file. We'll call it setup. Super easy. Import setup tools. We can then use setup tools to call the setup function, and in here you basically specify your configuration. The option is specifically install requires, and we provide an array of strings. Okay, so in setup CFG, the name for our package, I will call it raw coding example. Let me copy that. And if we would have been importing some kind of dependency or some kind of requirement, we would say package name equals package version. In our case, it is 001. We don't actually depend on ourselves or any other external packages, but if you would need a external dependency in your package, this is how you would consume it. So there we are, super simple. Your package, 3 files to essentially define the project. The setup CFG can be placed in setup.py, so really 2 files, but that is all you need to do. When you want to build a package or build, you compile your code, you have to go through a build process. With JavaScript, you do npm build or run whatever script, and that will take your code and use Webpack and whatever to fill in the blanks. With C#, the thing ends up in bin. With Java, it's in build folder, right? And you produce jar files. With C# you produce DLL files. In Python, it's a similar story as in JavaScript. Usually, it's just called a dist folder. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up a terminal in this location. And by the way, it's just a folder, right? And what we're going to do is, let's clear this. We're going to run Python, and we're going to run a module called build. It's going to tell you that the module is not found first. So what you're going to do is you're going to have to install it. So pip install build. This is going to install the build module. Let's go ahead and now run Python build. And this should take like 5, 10, 15 seconds. It will build your application or package, and you're done. So here we are, that's done now. We have a dist folder. You could imagine what it contains, the tar.gz file, which essentially contains the artifacts. So our package has been built and been placed in there. That is the thing that in the case of C# is what you would take and put in the NuGet feed, and then in Visual Studio, you can search for the NuGet package and be able to pull it down. In the case of what we're trying to do, we're gonna try to set up our own NuGet feed equivalent for Python, okay? And that is gonna live in the Azure Pipelines infrastructure and our build agent. So a build agent is just a virtual computer. So a computer that we're using, it's gonna be somewhere else. But the things that we do in the command line, we're essentially gonna script that to run on the other computer. So anything that you can write in the command line, you can have it run on any different computer. And it's going to vary from operating system to operating system. But that is essentially the gist of it. So this is our artifact. This is what we want to end up putting on the artifact repository and later on be able to consume it for ourselves and within our team. There's also this other folder here that's just some metadata. I've never bothered to find out what it is, but let's go ahead and delete these build artifacts. Let's initialize a Git repository, right? Git init, git add all, and git commit. And I'll say that this is the initial commit. You can then type in git status to make sure that you're in branch master and you've got everything. And you're pretty much done. Ready to go and push this into its own repository. let's go ahead and create a new repository within our Azure DevOps. And again, if you don't have repos, pipelines, and artifacts, make sure that the repository is not public. Otherwise, that is going to cause some problems. Just make sure you have enabled these in the project settings. So I'm going to come back here. Let's go ahead and create a new repository. I'm just going to call it same thing as my package. So in setup CFG, raw coding example, copy that, paste this here. Let's not add a README. Let's create this. And here we are. The repository is empty at this point. Let's go ahead and push something in there. Copy this first line. This will essentially add a remote address, so somewhere else that this is meant to live at. And then we just want to push. So let's just do git push first. Let's grab this command here that it gives us, try to push, and then it's going to try to ask for a password. So you can click on this generate git credentials, which should be able to just give you the password. So if we open this, have the username and the password, copy the password, place it in here, and you're good. You can do further things to set up credentials. Google that. You should get an answer, or you should already have that set up at least. The thing that we're trying to do is get our code in Azure Pipelines, and there it is, right? So that's there, all good. Now we want to set up a build. So the code is now somewhere else on an Azure Pipeline server. Now we want to set up a build on the Azure Pipeline server as well. Click on this button, set up build, or you can go into pipelines and set it up from there. But let's just click set up build. You should already have everything selected here. You should be up to this stage. If you are hosting your repository on GitHub, you can go straight into pipelines and you can create a new pipeline. Here you will then be able to select GitHub, and that will let you, pull your code from GitHub. You will have to authenticate. So here you will see it lets me pull code from my repositories. But anyway, we have a repository. Let's set up a build. We'll just select Python package, and we'll end up here. Let's just copy this URL because it will be quite useful. All right, here, right? So build Python apps. As long as we got that, let's go through this step by step. This first command here basically says run the pipeline when the master branch updates it. You can specify patterns. So if you are releasing features or hot fixes or bug fixes, whatever you want to call them, whatever your branch is called, you can set up /feature/star, and you will run it on multiple branches. You're then going to specify what machine you're running on, and then this strategy right here, it's basically so you can build on multiple different versions at the same time. We've specified the minimum version to be 3.6, so let's just grab 3.6. I'm going to cut that. I'm going to remove this strategy matrix thing, and for these steps right here, for the Python version, this is where we're going to replace it with 3.6, okay, for both of these. This setup step basically installs relevant Python tools on the build agent. Remember that I said that the build agent is just a virtual machine where we can run scripts. Same as you had to say install Python on Windows, you Google that, you get the installer, you install it. That machine is basically blank, almost blank every single time, and you have to go through the setup process. So that is going to set up the relevant tools. We then have some kind of middle script. Remember that we had to set up build, we had to use pip to install it. This is where that will happen. And this is where we'll set up those relevant tools here. The next bit is running PyTests here, which is not something that we have. So let's remove it. What we want to do is publish our package to an artifacts repository. So that's going to be in this section. In this documentation that was at the top here, hopefully you've opened the tab and you can take a look at it. We'll go to package and deliver code. Here you will get 2 lines. Again, super simple. We'll quickly go over this. Let's copy the first one, paste it here. Twine is just another tool in the Python ecosystem, which allows you to publish your code or your packages to a feed. So we can either specify an artifact feed or a Python upload service connection. A service connection is essentially if you have some kind of package feed and it can be external to Azure Pipelines, you create a service connection. So service connection can connect to things like NuGet feeds, Node Package Manager feeds, Docker registries, any other thing that Azure Pipelines chooses to support. And it's that kind of interface to connect to something external. We're not doing that. Our artifact repository is contained locally. If you have an external one, you have to specify a service connection. Not what we're going to do in this video. So we're going to be using an artifact feed. So we need a feed name. Let's go into artifacts. I'm going to middle mouse button click here to open it in a new tab. You should have no feed here. Let's create a feed, give it a name. I'll say raw coding example feed. Let's copy the name. We will say scope to organization. Don't want to put it to project. I'll mention why in a second, but let's create it. The feed's created, and that's it. That's all you need to do. Now you just place the name here. You're gonna get a little highlight here, and that is because the actual version is 1. So this bit here is a little bit outdated. So you want to go into the Twine task documentation. So this is documentation about that particular task, not Python overall. In here, yeah, you will see that the version is 1 that they're using for their examples, and the kind of steps that you have to go through, as well as covering some edge cases. So if we would have said that the feed is in a specific project, we would have to do this sort of prefix. So if you need to do that, just make sure you read through this documentation, right? But I mean, none of it is like secret knowledge. All of it is public, right? And then the last step here, where we actually want to use the Twine tool to publish our package to a feed, right? So let's copy that. Oh, don't need to go there. Paste it here. Let's copy the coding example feed name, place it here, and then package path files. Remember when we used Python, the Python build module, we've created a dist folder with all the artifacts in there. That is what we want to publish. So dist/star. So again, this sort of pattern matching also works here. So this is how I said feature/star, dist/star, everything within dist or any branch matching feature/star. You can trigger it for any branch, or yeah, we're basically publishing all files inside the dist folder. So that's that. We've got the bit that basically authenticates us with the feed and then pushes our package onto there. And then we have the thing that setups the tools, essentially the Python environment for us. And now we just have to make sure that we have all the relevant things to produce the final artifact right here. So we don't have any requirements to install. We don't need that. This first line is kind of the pattern that we want to follow, where we're basically using pip as a module. Instead of just doing pip install, we're using Python module pip, and then we're running install upgrade pip. So it will either install or upgrade pip if it already exists, okay? So that is kind of what we want to do. So let's just copy this and let's try to remember or understand what do we actually need. We'll need build, because that is, I mean, when we ran this in the command line, we actually needed to install it. So that is the first thing that we can say 100%. We need build in order to build our application. The next thing, it may not be so obvious, but we have setup tools import here. If you do not actually have it installed, you might need to do pip install setup tools on your local machine to have it available. So let's just make sure that we have setup tools installed here. And the last bit, again, maybe not so obvious, but we need Twine, right? So Twine is, again, a Python script that knows how to publish thing to a feed. So let's go ahead and get Twine in here. So we got those three things. We will then run Python module build. And in the end, we should end up with some artifacts in the dist folder, which we're then going to publish automatically. Let's go ahead and save and run this. This will create a commit message and update your repository. So let's save that. So now that that's saved, that's going to run. Yeah, let's open up the build. I guess let's go a little bit over the UI while that's happening. These rows are each individual pipelines. So just kind of like boxes. And then once you click into one, you have all the runs that can happen in that pipeline. You then open each individual run of the build, and in there you will have the job with each individual steps. So it looks like one of those failed. It looks like we are 403 forbidden. So this is actually kind of expected with technologies like Azure Pipelines, cloud environments. Generally, what you're going to have is permission issues, right? So it's a very enterprisey problem where stuff needs permission, right? Everything is default secured. So generally, you're going to get a lot of forbiddens, not alloweds, unauthorized. You will need to set up permissions. Let's go into artifacts. And they've hidden it quite well. Let's go into settings. Let's go into permissions. And now you're going to have these three commands here. And what we want to do is allow project scope build, right? So enable that. That should add another user group here. So our coding build service. That's good. Let's go back into pipelines. And by the way, if you're gonna, if you're gonna try to run it in a public project, you might need to fill out a form that will allow you to build a public project, because they had some basically they have issues of people running cryptocurrency scams on these free machines, so that you might have a different problem there. So just again, if you're having that problem, just make your project private. So anyway, we got the build again. We can rerun failed jobs, or we can run a new on the master branch. Let's trigger that run. We'll go into pipelines, and again, just to reiterate, this is our pipeline. So this is the individual section. We go into the individual section, and now we have individual runs. So all the runs of that pipeline. So that's the history. And then once we go into a run, we have all the information about that individual run, and we can look through all of these sections individually. So that is now finished. You should get all green, all successful. If you have any problems with this, please leave a comment. I'll try to help out when I can. But if you are encountering a problem, please read the comments first, okay? So if anybody else already solved the problem, don't start reposting the same issue. Next step, we can actually confirm that we have an artifact. We can go into artifacts, and we should be able to see our raw coding example version 0.01. If we want to publish a second version, we have to update the CFG file, and we'll publish a second version. And then if we want to install it somewhere else, we want to update this thing right here, right? So we update the version, or we scope to a specific version. So we have this artifact somewhere there. We want to be able to connect to that feed in order to grab this example package. So essentially, at the place that we want to arrive at is we actually want to run this command, right? So let's copy that. Let's paste it here, and this is essentially the error that you get. We don't know where to get it. We could not find version that satisfies the requirement, right? It can't find this package. So we want to arrive at a point where we want to be able to find it. Let's click on connect feed. We are connecting to pip because that's the tool that we're using. And we want to add this to the pip config. So it doesn't give you too much information about what the actual pip config is and stuff like that. So I'm going to leave another link in the description around the setup steps for that. But essentially, here it is. I'm going to be on Windows. You have, if you're on Unix, if you're in Linux or on Mac OS, go through these steps. But on Windows, we essentially want to go into program data, create a pip folder and a pip.ini file. So that's what I'm going to do. Let's go ahead and open up C, program data. Let's Control-Shift-N, pip, create a new folder, go into there, new text, and remove the txt in the end. We'll say yes. And there we have it. So we can now open this with Notepad. And all we want to do is we want to whack this configuration in there. We'll place it here. And that is about all you need to do. So now your pip is aware of your package repository. So let's come back here, and for all intents and purposes, I'm not going to be using this specific place to install the package. I will rather try to install it globally. Let me pull up my terminal. I'll open cmd.exe, and we're just going to install it in this directory, and then we're going to be able to use it globally. So let me clear this. What we want to do is, again, run the same command that we had previously. Come back here. I don't know why that's broken, but refresh page. Let's come to this package and let's pip install. Let's run this on the command line. And now what we're going to do is we're going to have to authenticate. You can authenticate through here, although it will be forgotten, and you will be in the same pain point where I was with the repositories here, where I try to pull or push. It's asking me all the time because I don't usually use this for my personal work. I usually do this at the actual workplace. So what you have to do in order to authenticate with the feed, again, this information is not private. We'll go to the configuration and into the configuration documentation for Python pip files, and we'll go to the authenticate section. We'll then have our basic authentication right here, where you will see that before this bit here, before the host name, we have to specify our credentials. So username, password. So right here, username, password, and @ If you're putting an email into your username, you will have to base64 encode it. So, I mean, that's written right here, right? So you'll have to do %, whatever the @ is. So if you have any other characters that are not URL safe, you will have to encode that. And you can use your general encode URI component if you want to do that, right? So if you're lazy, there you go. You will have to grab %40. But yeah, you can use that. Otherwise, yep, let's go ahead and grab some credentials for this. Go into this section here. So user settings and then personal access tokens. Again, I'm using middle mouse button click to open it in a new tab. I can then go ahead and create a new token, call it whatever. I can give it full access, or we can just give it packaging read, create that, grab the token, and then I will have to specify my username. Notepad is awesome. Let's put the token in here, save it, close it. Once that's done, let's go ahead back here, Ctrl-Z to exit, and we'll try again. At this point, it should be able to just pull it down, and now you should be able to use it. So we're going to test this by just opening Python, and we're going to import. What did we call it? I can't remember the name. Setup CFG, raw coding example. And actually, that's not what we're going to have. We are just going to have example. And then in the example, we're going to have file. And in file, we're going to have print hello. If not that, let's try from example, import, and let's file. Let's try import print hello, and then print hello, and there we go. We can also do the same with, let's say, we'll get my class, and then a equals my class, I don't know, hello world, and then we'll do called print, unless I've misspelt it. What was it? Pring. Hello world. So yeah, there it is. That's essentially it. If you then want to update it, you will have to run your pip install upgrade or uninstall install. That's essentially it to creating a package, hosting it, building it, and publishing it to an artifact repository on Azure Pipelines, and then being able to consume it locally. And then if you have a team, they all can connect to the same artifact feed and consume the package. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe. If you have any questions, make sure to leave them in the comments section, join the Discord server, and have a good day.